Last week was for us a transitional week. We stopped talking about the Ovis and we started talking about the Shvatim. But as you already know, Yaakov lives on. Yaakov lives till Vayechi. Because Bikish Yankov Leishev Vishalva Kafetz Alav Rugzal Yosef, which means, in other words, although Vayeshev Miketz Vayigash Vayechi is no longer the story of the Avos Ha'olam, of the fathers, it's the story of the children. Yaakov goes through more hardship and gets more reward beyond what should have been and what was his shlichus per se. So we're talking about the Shvatim, but Yaakov is very, very much alive. And last week we had a class on the words V'aviv Shamar Asadover. Today we're going to have a class on the words V'aviv Shamar Asadover. This sikha is the same three words as the last sikha, but a quite different insight. And it's so wonderful. Yosef is having dreams. The dreams are foretelling the future, and the future that they're foretelling is the Shvatim. It's not the Ovis. Now, if you recall, how did we explain last week this interplay? That in each one of the Ovis is represented everybody. The moment you get to the Shvatim, 12 tribes, 12 pathways, 12 different missions, and the brothers are jealous. They accept that Yosef has a different mission than them. They recognize that Yosef's mission is superior to theirs, and they're jealous. What is the V'aviv Shamar Asadover? Yaakov Avinu, the patriarch, looks at his children's missions, but doesn't see the divisions they see. He doesn't see the conflicts they appreciate. He sees the end, the unity within the mission. Reuven has one mission. Shimon has a second mission. Levi has a third mission. Yehuda a fourth mission. Yosef an 11th mission. Binyamin a 12th mission. And they're jealous of one another. But to him, those 12 men together are going to add up to one thing. V'aviv Shamar Asadover, Yaakov is thinking about that. So from Yaakov's perspective, there's no politics. Because Yaakov is seeing his 12 sons and their tasks and their roles as a part of him, as it's unified. Here we have a very similar sikha. And if you look at your text, you'll see that on page 134 I made an aleph. On page 135 I made a beis. And on page 136 I made a gimel. Because the Rebbe is going to squeeze this V'aviv Shamar Asadover for all it's worth. Yaakov Avinu sees beyond his children. The stories that are about to unfold are the life and times, the challenges, the trials and tribulations of his 12 sons. He has clarity about all that. And from his point of view, where he has that clarity, he's Shamar. His children are competing. His children are clamoring. And he has a certain clarity. But the sikha doesn't begin with the V'aviv Shamar Asadover. The V'aviv Shamar Asadover does not really take over the sikha until page 134. The first half of the sikha deals with something much, much more immediate. And the immediate issue that the first half of the sikha deals with is the dreams. And let's read. I'm starting from the beginning of the sikha. Vayisaper al Aviv Elachav, Yosef HaTzadik has a second dream. He tells it to his father as well as his brothers. Vayiga Be'aviv, and his father screams at him. He comes to his brothers, whom he told the dream the day before, and they got very angry at him. And he comes the next day, tells him another dream, but the second time Yaakov also hears, and Yaakov screams at him. So and he tells him, what is the significance of the dream you just had? Will it happen that I, v'imcha, and your mother, v'achecha, and your brothers will come to bow before you? He screams at him, nonsense! That's what Yaakov says to Yosef. So Rashi interprets, and I'm reading the underlined, as I always do, just the underlined. Your mother's already dead. And if your mother's already dead, she can't bow to you. If she can't bow to you, then it's not true that your mother's going to bow to you. Says the Rashi, in truth, Hashem, when he indicated that the moon is bowing to Yosef, he meant to Billah, that she raised him like a mother. So, Yaakov says, the dream is nonsense because your mother's not going to come and bow to you. And Rashi says, no, it's not nonsense, it means Billah. But then he says, our rabbis learn from this, there is no dream without nonsensical words. V'Yankov neskaven laheitzi adavim aleibonav. Yankov intended to distract his children from their jealousy. Shalai yakni'u, they shouldn't be jealous. Lakach omer lehaveina v'v'gemer. Therefore I told him it's impossible for your mother to bow, and therefore the rest of it is nonsense. Just like your mother will never bow to you, the rest is also bow. So Rashi brings two insights. The first insight is, just like your mother is not going to bow to you, no one's going to bow to you. According to the second insight, Yankov knows it's true, but some aspects aren't true. So the Rebbe continues, where I'm underlined, and he says, these two interpretations are contradictory. The first interpretation was, Yankov didn't know that this means Billah, and he was therefore saying the dream is not true. And Beis, Peter Shabbai said in the second interpretation, there's no dream without idle words, indicates that Yankov believed that it's true. In other words, the Rebbe's question is, look at the next paragraph. According to the first interpretation of Rashi, it seems that Yankov is saying that just like your mother's not going to bow to you, the rest of it is all, it's never going to happen. According to the second interpretation, Yada Yankov Shachalem Hu Amiti, he knows that the dream is true, and he's simply saying it to discourage his children's jealousy. And the Rebbe says, Zeu Siyam Apirish Abeis, as Rashi in fact concludes, the Afshu Yada Shachalem Emes, he knew it's true. Mikoma came Omar came Lahitzi Milev Bonav, he said so to take it out of the hearts of his children. So the first interpretation of Rashi is Yankov says to Yosef, this is a Baba Mais. The second interpretation is Yankov says to Yosef, I know it's true, but there are things about it which are not true. And of course the Rebbe's question is, how can you have two interpretations that are so conflicted? Next paragraph, Va'aviv Shaman Asadovid Pirish Rashi. Yankov, Aviv means Yankov is watching to see Yosef's prophecy be fulfilled. Says Rashi, he's waiting and hoping, when is it going to happen? Now, according to these words, Yankov is waiting and watching. It's clear. Yankov was sure. It's a true dream. It will certainly be realized. He was wondering when it's going to happen. So the Rebbe sees here contradictions. According to one interpretation, Yankov doesn't believe it at all. According to another interpretation, he believes it, but he believes that there's nonsense in the dream. And then it says Yankov is waiting to see when it's all going to happen. How do we reconcile all of these things? And the Rebbe's answer is, and I should have underlined some more words, but this will be sufficient. These are not two interpretations; they're one interpretation. Look at what I underlined on page 132. Yankov layada shadvarim agiyim lebil. Yankov did not know that when it said your mother is going to bow down, the moon is going to bow down, it meant Billah. Nevertheless, he knew for sure that the dream is real. But it says later on, that Yankov is waiting to see when it's going to happen. And therefore we have a problem. Now, if I wanted to add something to this, I would say very simply this. There are two types of dreams. There are dreams that are meaningless, and there are dreams that are prophetic. Dreams that are meaningless are meaningless. Dreams that are prophetic should be perfect. If they're prophetic, they should represent a certain perfection based on the fact that it's prophecy. Here you have a dream with a prophecy that Yaakov thinks is not going to happen perfectly. So the Rebbe says, our rabbis extracted from this, even if a person has a dream, and the dream is a prophecy, there's things about it which are imperfect. And this is what Yankov is thinking. The dream is true, and it will be realized. This one detail, that Rachel will bow down to Yosef, is the nonsensical aspects within it. The truth is, this is not from the nonsense within the dream, because it's a reference to Billah. In other words, Yankov says, since Rachel can't come bow down, so even a dream which is prophecy has to have Dvarim B'Teilim. And Rashi says, no, a dream which is prophecy has no Dvarim B'Teilim. How could Rachel bow down to Yosef? It means Bilha. So what's happening here is as follows. We all agree that the dream is a prophecy. Yankov understood that. But Yankov thinks since one aspect is unreal, then there must be Dvarim B'Teilim even in such a dream. And Rashi says, but Yankov is wrong. Every aspect of the dream is precise, is perfect, Because in a prophetic dream, everything is exact. Bilhah is going to bow down instead. Okay? Now go to the left, page 133 on the left. But Rashi says, just like Rachel's bowing down to Yankov is Dvarim B'Teilim, he says, Ein Chaleim B'Lei Dvarim B'Teilim Lashon Rabbi. The expression of the Chazal is, there's no dream without words that are empty in Lashon Rabbi, in plural. In other words, Yankov is thinking, Shesh Kama Dvarim B'Teilim B'Chaleim, that when you have a dream, even if it's a dream that's prophecy, there has to be more than one inaccuracy. Just like it's impossible for Rachel to bow down to Yosef. So he knows it's a true dream. He knows it's a prophecy, but there's Dvarim B'Teilim in it. So there's another thing which is also Dvarim B'Teilim. Kach Choshav Yankov is also thinking. Shegam Zed, that also this aspect, Shehu Yovei L'Ishtachav is L'cho, or that Yankov himself should bow to Yosef. There's something else going on here. Part of the dream is that Yankov is going to bow to Yosef. Yankov objects to that. He says, your mother is never going to come bow to you. Right? So the dream is false. No, it's a true dream. But Dvarim B'Teilim Lashon means just like this isn't true, something else isn't true. I'm not going to bow to you either. So there's a lot of going on here. Yankov is trying to, on the one hand, discourage his children from being too upset at Yosef. It's a Baba Maisa. On the other hand, he recognizes that this is a legitimate dream. And on the third hand, he finds more than one aspect of Dvarim B'Teilim. The first aspect of Dvarim B'Teilim was that Rachel cannot bow to Yosef, she's passed away. And the second is that Yankov won't bow down to Yosef. Turn the page. Now the Rebbe goes into the question of whether this actually happened or not, but we're not going to go there. So, what we have so far is as follows. Yosef has a dream. His brothers are furious. Yankov wants to quiet them, so he tells them it's a Dvarim B'Teilim, a dream. But Yankov also has to quiet himself. So he tells himself, Rachel is not going to bow down to Yosef, I'm not going to bow down to Yosef. The rest of it is real. And therefore it says, V'oviv shomar asadover, he waits for it to happen. In other words, Yankov in his mind reconciles the issue. How? It's a true dream, right? His children have to be convinced that the dream is not true at all. Yankov has to be convinced that it's true, but there's at least two aspects of Dvarim B'Teilim. Rachel won't bow and he won't bow. Yosef HaTzadik knows that everything is perfect. But V'yoviv Shoman HaSadavar means Yankov is waiting to see the part of the dream which is true and not Dvarim B'Teilim, how and where and when it is going to unfold. So now the Rebbe goes on and says, what does V'yoviv Shoman HaSadavar mean? What does it mean? And the Rebbe gives us three insights. Okay? The first insight is, V'yoviv Shoman HaSadavar is, if you look where I made the Aleph, on page 134, I'm skipping the first three words. Shehu yimlech al echav. Yaakov is waiting for Yosef to become a king over his brothers. At sheishtachav olay arta, they're going to bow down to him. V'at kedekach sheYankov hayamamtinu mitzapa matza yavi adavar. V'ovev shamazav means Yankov says, okay, Rachel's not bowing down to Yosef. I'm not bowing down to Yosef, but the rest of my children are. V'ovev shamazav adavar. Yankov says, oh, I can't wait for that to happen. So the first interpretation of Aviv Shama David is Yankov is waiting to see when Yosef is going to dominate his brothers. That's the first Aviv Shama David. But the Rebbe has a problem with that. Why? Yankov is a father. What delight, what excitement can a father get from knowing that one day one of his sons will dominate his brothers? He's excluded Rachel, he's excluded himself. So the children are going to bow to Yosef. So why is he so excited? What's the V'oviv Shoman HaSadavar that the brothers will bow down to Yosef? So the Rebbe offers a second opinion. Okay? And it's the next paragraph here. Vayishlacheyu me'ei mekchevrin. It says in Parshas Vayeshev that when Yankov sent Yosef to his brothers, he sent them from the valley of Chevron. Says Rashi, me'etza amuka shaleisi tzadek hakava b'Chevron. It had to do with the secret plans of the Eibishter, which was established by Avraham Avinu, who was buried in Chevron. In other words, bottom of page 134. Now, Yankov is waiting. Mosa Yove. What is it going to happen that the Jewish people are going to go into Golus? In other words, Harei bepnimius. In deeper words, Ein hakavona lemalchusei shel Yosef kishel atzmo. Yankov Avinu is not waiting for Yosef to become a king over his brothers in itself. Ela bekach, but rather from the fact shegzeiras bein absorim yiskayim adem Yosef, that the decree that the Jewish people to go to Egypt is going to unfold through Yosef HaTzadik. And this is it. Yainkiv ha'yamamtin u'mitzapa, he's waiting and wishing. Mosa yiskayim chalaim Yosef, when is Yosef's dream going to be realized? Because he knows that Yosef's dream is for Yosef Yimlach is a king. And and him and his family are going to Egypt in an honorable way, setting up the Maluch. So here's a second V'aviv Shama Asdava. Listen carefully again, girls. What's the first touch of V'aviv Shama Asdava? Yankov can't wait for Yosef's brothers to bow to Yosef. And the Rebbe says, that doesn't make sense. Why would Yankov want that? So now we're going to do a second insight. Yankov envisions his brothers bowing to Yosef as an indication that they're going to go into Golus in a peaceful way, and he is waiting for this. He knows they have to go into Golus, because only after they go into Golus can they come out of Golus, and only after they come out of Golus with great wealth can they get the Torah. So Shamar Asadover is not for one brother to dominate the rest of his brothers, but for Yidden to go into Golus with Derech Kavod. That becomes the second answer. And the Rebbe doesn't like it either. Why would anybody wait for his children to go into Golus, covered or not covered? So the Rebbe gives us a third insight. And the third insight is on the bottom of the right column, page 135. You should know that it says in Chassidus, Shekol Yisrael Nekram B'Shem Yosef Ne'er Ketzem Yosef. The Jewish people are known by many names. One of the names by which we're known is Yosef. All the Jewish people are Yosef. We're Yisrael, we're Yankiv, we're also Yosef. Why are all the Jewish people called Yosef? Because of Golus. I have mentioned to you a few times that the Shalach HaKadosh in his commentary on Chumash gives labels to the parashas. These four parashas, Vayeshev, Miketz, Vayigash, Vayechi, are called collectively Tzayin Yosef, the sheep of Yosef. For this reason, because Yosef represents the Jewish people in Golus, and in as much as Yosef represents the Jewish people in Golus, all of us are called Yosef. Now, why are we called Yosef when it comes to Golus? Second column, 135. Says the Rabbi Yehuda Yosef l'gabishara shvatim hoya. What makes Yosef different than his brothers? Was that in the fact sheshar hashvatim hoya reyetzein? All of the shvatim were shepherds. Why shepherds? Because shepherds were mufrashim umavdalim meyane elam, separate from the world, totally. Why were they separate from the world? Bechdei shaleyeval b'lo me'avodas Hashem. The world shouldn't disturb them from serving HaKadosh Baruch. Mashen ken Yosef atzadik hoya beGolus. Yosef was in Golus. Nishbal Bein HaGoyim, he was captured. But Yisayim is, moreover, not only was he in Golus, but Shayashelet B'Chaleretz Mitzrayim, he ruled over Mitzrayim. This wasn't only superficial. He was really totally involved in mastering the Golus. Skip what I skipped. Became at the same time. No matter how busy Yosef got in working Golus, Loi nitku ways, it didn't tear him away. Va'afilvu loi bilbul ways, it didn't even confuse him. Me'avedas Hashem, from serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'gam be'eis asokei bahem, even when he was doing the work in the house of Petifer and Parei, nishar, he remained betachlos hadvekes belakus, with the ultimate attachment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Atshayim Merkav Mamash Lakus, it was a chariot for godliness. Yosef represents a Jew, could be in the darkest situation, and his Jewishness isn't touched. V'zehu, bottom of page 135. Now this is why. Mashakol Yisrael Nekroim Al Shem Yosef. Why are we called Yosef? Turn to page 136. Kiat Keach Sheyesh Lechol Yisrael. The power that every Jew has and needs. Laved as Golus, to survive the Golus. Nimshach Haba Yosef HaTzadik, comes from Yosef HaTzadik. So the Rebbe says, and again I'm reading only the underline. V'lachein ho Yainkiv Mamten Mitzape. This is what Yainkiv is waiting for. L'kiyum chaleimei shal Yosef, to the realization of Yosef's dream. And what is that? That all the Jews become Yosef-like. Shedafke be'efen kazeh. Only when all the Jews become subservient to the derech avodah of Yosef, be'keicham shal Yisrael, the Jewish people have the power, lavid es helam v'hested the Golus Mitzrayim, to survive the Golus. So let's repeat the whole situation. Yosef has a dream. Yaakov convinces Yosef's brothers that the whole dream is Baba Mises. Yaakov convinces himself, there's at least two things in the dream which are inaccurate. Rachel's not coming to bow, and he's not coming to bow. Now Rachel is Bilah. Whether Yaakov himself bowed or not is unclear. You have to look at the Sikha, page 134. But to Yosef, everything about the dream is perfect. Fine. So we understand there's three perspectives in the same dream. The brothers think it's all Baba Mises, Yosef think it's all legitimate, Yaakov sees it's legitimate with Dvarim B'Teilim, Lashon and Rabbim. But what's V'av Shama? What's he waiting for? The first interpretation is he's waiting for Yosef to dominate his brothers. The Rebbe says that doesn't sound like a good explanation. Second one is he's waiting for the Jewish people to go into Golus in a peaceful way. That's not also adequate. And the third one is he's waiting for the brothers to become subservient to Yosef, to adopt Yosef's methods to survive the Golus. And the Rebbe doesn't like this either. Why not? Because who was waiting for his children to go into Golus? Even if he's waiting for his children to go into Golus and survive, why sit around and wait for your children to go into Golus? And therefore the Rebbe gives a fourth interpretation, bottom of 136, right column. Right? Yankov was waiting for Golus, not good enough. The Rebbe gives a fourth answer. You know what Yankov is waiting for? He's thinking about the fact every Jew waits for the Gula which is going to come after the Gullus. Gulas b'nei Yisrael mi Mitzrayim, the redemption of the Jewish people from Gullus. Ukemudgish behemshech lashon Rashi, in the words of Rashi, Rashi says, Shaman Astav like Shemer Emunim. Shemer Emunim means he was guarding Jewish faith. Masha b'nei Yisrael mechakim u'metzapim, that the Jewish people are waiting and wishing le'emunaseh shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The translation of the word emunaseh means the reliability, the trustworthiness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, legolam, to redeem them from the Golas. And that's the fourth insight in the V'av Shaman Asadova. V'av Shaman Asadova, according to the fourth pshat, is Yankiv hears Yosef's dream. And he understands that this dream is about going into Golos. But he also understands that the dream is about going into Golos so that after the Golos you can come out of the Golos and get the Torah. That's the V'av Shaman Asadova. He's not waiting for the brothers to serve Yosef. He's not waiting for the brothers to go into Golos. He's not waiting for the brothers to go into Golos and act like Yosef acts. He's waiting for the Yulah, which is going to follow all of those events. And that's the Sikha. First of all, when it comes to the dreams, the brothers think it's all a lie. And again, this is my aspect here. Yosef sees it's all true, and Yankov says, Dvarim b'teilim loshen rabim. And the V'av Shomer Sadavar has four insights. And the last insight is that before the Golos even started, Yankov was waiting for the Golos to follow. He was looking forward to the fact that after the Golos was going to come the Geula. Now girls, I want to tell you a story and make a point as a conclusion to this Sikha and to this class. When World War I ended, Russia was in terrible turmoil. The future was very uncertain. The one thing that everybody knew was that the Tsar was overthrown. The Rebbe Rashab, the Frierdiker Rebbe's father, as soon as the war ended, went back to work to strengthen and rebuild Lubavitch communities that had been so destroyed by the war. He went about his task optimistically. He went about his task with the hope that Russia would return to stability and religious freedom. A few months before he passed away, the Soviets, the communists, came into Rostov. In other words, within a year or two, it became obvious that the communists were going to take over Russia and all of Russia was going to go communist. Rostov is the bottom of Russia. It's warm. The Bolshevik Revolution started in Leningrad, which is the very, very top of Russia. So between 1917 and 1919, 1920, they had to push back the opposition. There was all these different... They were fighting. In Russia, there was civil war. They were killing each other. When the Bolsheviks came into Rostov, the Rebbe Rashab said, quote, Ich ken mit seinen einem. I can't live with them. And people who in the know will tell you that the Rebbe Rashab Poshet wrote his ticket. He says, I don't want to live. He passed away and he left it for his son. That's the history. About 3 weeks before he passed away, 2 weeks and a few days, there was a Purim Fabring. The Purim Fabring was very, very depressed because there was martial law. The Soviets had just come to town and they were running the city like a military city. They were shooting people in the street for violating a curfew and so on. So Chassidim came to the Rebbe, but it was very, very, very depressed. It was very, very unhappy. Suddenly, at midnight, the Rebbe Rashab changes his mood completely. He turns to the Frierdiker Rebbe and he says, Simchas Torah, we didn't anticipate any of this. We didn't think of any of this. Let's make now Simchas Torah. And the Chassidim got mashke. They collected money, which were the two biggest Avedas in those days, and they started making noise, which was the third biggest Aveda. Large groups of people gathering in the middle of the night was reason to shoot people, Rahman al-San. And they started Fabring. The Frierdiker Rebbe was in a total panic. The Rebbe Rashab was, I'm king. They came in from the KGB. They weren't called the KGB in those days. They were called the Checker Guard, NKVD. They keep changing their names. And they stood there. And the Rebbe Rashab laughed in their faces. They stood opposite him, and he looked straight at them. He says, "You're nothing to me. You're nobodies." And their face showed that they were turning red and turning white. They were very upset. And the Rebbe was mocking them and belittling them. And finally he said, "Ich will sagen Chassidus wollen sie im Ganzen is battle werden. I'll say Chassidus will become totally battle." And he said the famous Maimeresh is Goyim Amalek. Everybody was sure that the next morning they're coming arresting the Rebbe Rashab. It didn't happen. 2.5 weeks later, he passed away. And I want to share with you an insight on this story. The previous Rebbe said about his father's passing that it was before his time. He was supposed to live longer. He just didn't want to live. So he passed away and he left us for the Fidikim. Shalebi Ita, not in the right time. The Rebbe Rashab passed away because he wanted nothing to do with the communists. He left it to the Fidikim Rebbe. There's a famous story once where the Rebbe Rashab once had a fabring in Simchas Torah. And he was very, very emotional. Very emotional. So emotional that the Pashat worried about his health. So they called his mother, the Rebbe Tzidivke. And she came into the Fabrengen. When she came in, the Rebbe Rashab stood up for her. And the mother went over to the Rebbe and said that he should go in the other room and relax, rest. And she said in Yiddish, Dir is nicht gut. Dir is nicht gut means you don't feel well. But literally, Dir is nicht gut means that your life is no good. Contextually, it means you don't feel well. Literally means, she says, Mir is nicht gut. Mir is good. Mir is good. Halavai soll Yosef Yitzchak sein hazeh good. I don't have it good, I have it very good. I wish Yosef Yitzchak should have it so good like I have it. He says 9 years before he passed away, he told his mother, my son, Yosef Yitzchak, is going to get all the tzaras. And that's exactly what happened. The Fidik Rebbe dealt with the communists, they put him in jail, they almost ended his life. With Nisim, he survived, and so on. But I want to give you an insight here. The Rebbe Rashab sees the Bolsheviks coming. He wants nothing to do with them. And he totally is mavatal them. Totally. They should have arrested him, they didn't. They should have punished him, they didn't. So there's a mysticism to this. And the mysticism to this goes like this. Every tzaddik knows everything. Except his own golus. Your own golus you can't know, because if you know your golus, it's not a golus. The Soviet golus was the Frierdiker Rebbe's. It wasn't the Rebbe Rashab. So the Rebbe Rashab is mavatal it. He destroys it, he breaks it. He has no fear of it. And by the Rebbe Rashab having that fabrengen and totally being mavatal the Soviets before they had a chance to become the evil power that they became, he's anticipating v'oviv shoman asadova that one day it's going to end. Because it's not his golus. He sees beyond the golus. The Frierdiker Rebbe couldn't see it that way because it was his golus. And this is a pattern that you see by tzaddikim. Every tzaddik has to struggle with his own nisyonis. But another tzaddik, Shomer Asadover, he doesn't only see that you're going to suffer. He doesn't only see that you need to suffer. He doesn't only see how you're going to survive. He sees the Geula which is going to come after. Since it's not his golus, to him the golus is a non-thing. And that's what Rashi is saying. V'oviv Shomer Asadover Yankiv is mitzape Mosai. Not when are they going to go into Golus, when is Yosef's brothers going to bow to Yosef, when are they going to learn how to behave like Yosef, when is the Geula going to come? Only Yankiv could be mitzapeh for that. Because since Yankiv is not connected to that Golus, he's able to see beyond that Golus. Yosef and his brothers, since that Golus is theirs, they can't see past it, they have to go through it. So it's the second time we're learning the story of the Shvatim. This Sikha is about Yankov and Yosef and his brothers. But with the presence of Yankov Avinu. Yankov Avinu is around. He's going to be around till Vayechi. And just like last week, V'oviv Shomer Asadova means Yankov has a different perspective. Here again, V'oviv Shomer Asadova means Yankov has a different perspective. He sees a golus, and he sees its necessity, and he sees its reality, and he sees its pain, and he sees its difficulties. But he also sees what's going to happen after. And that's Yankiv's Shomer Asadover. Because it's not his golus, he can see all the way till the Geula. And like it says, Taka Pashas Vayechi, Yankov gathers his children. He wants to tell them when they're going on a Mitzrayim. And Hashem takes away his Ruach HaKodesh. Why? Yankov sees when Yidden are going to Mitzrayim. Why can't he tell them? If Yankov tells the Shvatim when they're leaving Mitzrayim, the golus is not a golus. For it to be a golus, they're not allowed to know. So how does Yankov know? Because it's not Yankov's golus, it's his children's golus. V'oviv Shomer Asadover, Yankov exists before the golus starts. But because it's not his Gullus, he sees the Gula which is going to come afterwards. And that's the koyach for the Gula to finally come.